Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're going to let more people come in. Thank you, everybody. Crowd into the Zoom room, crowd into the webinar. Welcome.
The right day to do it with all these kids out of school around here. What's up with that?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, we got a nice little crowd coming in, and I'm going to give us another minute before we get kicked off. Thank you all for taking time out of your calendar. I always say, since we are talking a little bit about money and business today, time is our biggest asset. In some ways, I think it's worth more than a lot of the other stuff that we have. So give it another minute or so. We have a pretty good mix today of both business owners and other professionals. So it's going to be great. And we'll go over some housekeeping, but I'll go ahead and give everybody heads up now. Please feel free to put questions in the Q&A. Of course, there is a chat, but use the Q&A for your questions, and we are going to allocate the last 10 minutes of today specifically around the content to be able to answer those questions. So, but again, we thank everybody for taking time out. We are up to already 14 people in the room. Again, thank you, everybody. And what we'll do is we will go ahead and get started. So what I want to begin is say, I had this vision early in the year to do this webinar, and I knew I was going to reach out to these two guys, and my vision was to create some really good content that really was almost like a primer and addressed a lot of the key issues for business owners if and when they wanted to sell. Because where I sit, and I think these two gentlemen will say the same thing, we're kind of in the business, we see the mistakes made, and it's almost evangelical in how we want to explain, like, no, don't do it that way, do these things. And the three of us are also friends, and so I wanted today be like, hey, we're all just hanging out and having a real conversation around things that we can do, that you can do as either a professional or a business owner to maximize exit and how much money you get. The reality is, with business owners, this likely is your biggest asset. Might be much bigger than a retirement account or any homes you have. And so it's important that we get it right. And so that was kind of the crux of today. David, Mitesh, David Hern, maybe you can speak a little bit from an introduction level on why you think this information is important too before we dig again to our roundtable.
Sure. Yeah, it's nice to see everybody. So for me, this is almost a question of what breaks your heart for me. And so what breaks my heart and why I practice specifically in this sub arena of the exit planning M&A corridor is just how many businesses fail to ultimately transact. That the number one exit pathway is attrition. As they shutter their doors. And given how much that asset is worth before all of that on their personal financial statement, that just breaks my heart on how much value that could have gone to them, their loved ones. And even if someone like Meredith is in their life telling them, hey, you're blessed, you don't even need another dollar for this business to make it through retirement. But to have all of that value dissipate and not go into your stakeholders' hands, your employees, your vendors, for me, that's a crime.
Got it. And David, tell us a little bit about your business, what you do.
So yeah, we're in the valuation services space. So we help companies ascertain their value and prepare for exits.
Great. Thank you. Mitesh, take on, hey, how with us opening, like why this is so important, and who the heck are you, my friend?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name is Mitesh Patel, and I'm the founder and principal of Blue Sky Law. We are a firm that is solely focused on privately held businesses. Most of our clients are in the middle market to lower middle market space. I would say our average client revenue, annual revenue is probably between 40 to 65 million, somewhere in that range. We do a vast number of mergers and acquisitions every year. People buying businesses, selling their businesses, and I think similar to what David was just saying is that we see people leaving things on the table, and the main thing they're leaving on the table is money. Now, money isn't number one for every business owner that's exiting, but I would say 90%, 95%. That's the number one thing that they're focused on. But and these aren't things that we can tell them. Hey, you're leaving money on the table. By the time a transaction kicks up, okay, that's water under the bridge at that point. So, most definitely, I think that having a smoother transaction, putting more money in your pocket, and frankly, more control over that process, you can definitely have it if you start earlier, really start planning for it. I guess the other thing that I would say too is that it is very much now an insular industry, meaning buying and selling businesses and the advisors that help with that. It's not something that folks can or should. Well, there are folks that dabble in it, but it is not a place where folks should dabble. It is very much a specialized industry. There are just so many nuances these days on how things can be done. So I think yet another reason that you shouldn't approach it lightly.
Got it. So business transactions and brain surgery, don't DIY it, basically.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so my name is Meredith Moore, because I really didn't introduce myself. I've owned Artisan Financial Strategies now for 25 years. My take on stuff is most of the people I meet, they'll likely have a CPA, they'll likely have some sort of attorney. Again, we can get into different types. I'm sure Mitesh is going to dig into that deep, like why your trust and estate person shouldn't be really doing some of this stuff. And they may have an investment advisor and an insurance professional, but nobody's talking and balls are getting dropped. And so that's what prompted me to really dig in on some of this today. And so let's kind of get kicked off. And before we get kicked off again on some housekeeping, please put all your Q&A below. Do not put it in the chat. Just put it under the Q&A tab. And the last 10 minutes, we are going to go deep and meet you all where you are. So feel free to ask any question that you need to. You've got a whole host of resources right on your screen in front of you. So to get us kicked off, let's hit on Mr. Hern. What are the top 3 mistakes that you see in business valuation? And what should we know about it?
So what I would start with is this, for those that are on the call, I'm assuming many are here in the South, and the topic right now is we're all huddled up in our homes because our kids are all home because of Hurricane Helene, right? And, this shouldn't surprise us. We've had Katrina, we've had bigger storms, there's a hurricane season, right? And so for me, if I'm still living through this year after year, and many times they miss the state of Georgia, and sometimes they just park over us after they hit Florida, right? And so shame on me if after years and years of this, I don't ever take any additional action, right? So I see a lot of business owners that rather than learn from some of these near misses, and go buy a Generac, right, for a backup home generator, put in backup internet, they just keep going, oh, oof, thank gosh, it missed, right? We have to have firms that, I had a professor once that gave a visual of a colonial ship, sailing across the sea, right? And that's the business. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they don't intentionally lower the water to expose the rocks in their business that can damage that ship. They wait until a Hurricane Helene is hitting them in the face and they have 2 days to prepare, right? And so that's the first big mistake is not creating this culture of finding the rocks, of lowering the water themselves. So that's number one. The second would be this theme of, they almost have an air of, well, I'm successful. I got here, wherever here is, right? But they don't understand that, yeah, a team was involved. that got them there, but that same team might not get them where they're trying to go. And the same can be applied for the advisor team representing them. And so they don't focus enough on building that, whether you call it a SWAT team or a cabinet of advisors, well ahead of the quote unquote storm, right? So that would be the second mistake I see a lot of owners make. And then thirdly, I would say, you know, a lot of owners have some KPIs they look at, key performance indicators. Maybe if they don't register with that, they might OKRs, objectives and key results, and they have a bunch of them, but they're really not looking at them well. And there's not like one that supersedes the others. And there really is. We believe the North Star KPI above all other KPIs is valuation, firm value, enterprise value, equity value, right? Transferable value. And so too often business owners use and consider firm value purely as a tactical, once in a while metric, as opposed to a complete mindset shift that this is a strategic tool that in theory, all these other fancy KPIs like EBITDA and revenue and so forth, all should be feeding into. And so for me, those are the top three mistakes we see people make is this waiting until the hurricane gets there and not learning when those near misses, not lowering the water intentionally themselves year after year. They don't hire a team of advisors way ahead of these events. And they use valuation, if at all, as merely a tactical tool once in a while.
That's great, David. Mitesh, did you have any takes on his things before you dig in? I'm already hearing the key theme that we're going to hear from everybody here. These business owners aren't starting early enough and creating that culture to really be thinking about this.
Yeah, and I won't harp too much on those, but those are definitely two of mine. Those points of not starting early enough. I think that comes from just a general lack of understanding of what's coming down the road, and also the tenacity of business owners going, I got this, right? That's gotten them through most of their career. But as I mentioned just a little while ago, this process, the succession process, the exit process, the mergers and acquisitions process, it is a full-on different type of animal. And so yeah, you definitely need to start early. You got to get that advisor team, and it's a different advisor team more than likely than what you have worked with throughout your career. What David mentioned is one of my top ones, is that business owners generally do not know what the market value of their company is. Meaning, what can you go and sell it for? And so we're really big, very bullish on valuations. I always like to throw this analogy out there, but I think it's true. It's a fun little experiment. You all can try at home if you've got, if you have more than one equity owner, is write down on a piece of paper what you think the current value of your company is. And my guess is that if there's more than one owner, you all are going to be wildly apart on what those are. And that's just an example that most just don't know. It's not something that they are being asked on a daily, yearly basis. And so it's one of the first things we like to start with is call a company like David's and go, look, get a valuation done, set that baseline, right? You wouldn't go and sell your home or your car if you didn't really know kind of what the market is bringing. And so people put time into that. Why not put some time into really finding out, what the value of your company is? So again, those are a little bit repetitive. I think that business owners start conversations with potential buyers, sometimes with brokers and investment bankers before they really get certain things cleaned up. And there is an order to things. Can you do it out of order and will it work? Sure. Are you going to maximize value if you do that? Probably not. And so, don't be shy, right? This is not a process that business owners are going to go through all the time. Actually, statistically speaking, most business owners will only go through this one time, right? So if you've got one shot at your life's work, do it right? Tuck your pride back and start asking your current advisors, right? Your current CPA, your financial planner, what should I be doing? How do I go about this? Who else do we need to have on the team. And not that those folks are going to go anywhere, but you might need to supplement, and more than likely will need to, supplement as you go. I also encourage folks, do not try to do this on your own. There's no need to learn a new job. I mean, why would you do that? Focus on your business, focus on keeping profits high, revenue coming in, your employees happy, and go and hire folks that are going to help you through this process. Um, and I think we kind of said this in a different sort of way, but start early. And when I mean early, I like 2 to 3 years out, really 3 years out. Everybody goes, gosh, it's such a long time. Why so far out? But the actual sale process, once you're like, okay, I'm ready, getting a valuation, hiring and getting your investment banker or business broker out there into the market, that's almost a 6 month process of them going through that. Then once they identify a buyer, then you've got a couple of months of negotiation, 3 to 4 months of due diligence and legal, and then you close. And there's a year right there, right? So if you start a year out, you're a little short already. So start early.
So what I'm hearing from both of you, and I've had this happen a few times, I'm sure you all can tell even crazier stories around this than me, like going to your industry friend who's like, hey, the multiple is 6 times EBITDA, that's not going to do it. Like, we need to pay the big boy CVA valuation expert like Dave Hern here to get the number that can't be disputed. Is that what I'm hearing?
You want to take that one first, Mitesh?
No, I was going to say, David, that one's your that valuation. Go for it.
Um, this question drives me crazy, and it's the number one question that comes up on like every prospect discussion I have. Even if you nail, let's call it the rule of thumb range of where that multiple is, and that multiple, by the way, is always changing, up and down, squeezing, lengthening in all kinds of industries, macroeconomic cycles. So, but let's just say they're getting at least the box right. Um, Everyone thinks they're right there in the middle of that box with whatever that middle was. You know, it's like when I go for a big surgical event and they make me sign my life away right before we do it, and they say, okay, it's a 5% chance. Some poor person has got to be part of that 5%. This is a bell curve when we start talking about this multiple question. And there's a lot more than 5%. We're talking about 50 have to be on the left side of this bell curve. So, the hard part of all of this is when it gets into due diligence of really, do you deserve that 6? If 6 is right, or are you something less, or are you something more? That's the secret sauce of all this. Is going to be the time to vet your unique situation, your unique structure, your unique risk pattern to figure out, are you really a 6 or are you really a 4? And those are material differences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So where I sit, in terms of the 3 mistakes that I see most is number one, business owners have no idea typically what financial security means. And when I say financial security, I mean you're working because you want to, or you're owning your business because you want to, not because you have to. So if you had an exit event and you got your lotto payout, which everybody thinks they're going to get because they haven't talked to Dave, they haven't talked to Mitesh, and they think like the 3 million bucks is going to do it, where they can just kick back, go sit on the porch and watch lemonade and drink lemonade for the rest of their life. And so they haven't worked with the advisor that's run stress tests and scenario tests to truly see what financial security or financial independence means. And by the way, it's not always a lump sum. A lot of people do it with income. Maybe you have a bunch of rental properties. So what is it going to take if you're selling this massive asset? What do you need to have financial security? And so defining what that is on the personal side is so important. So you kind of know, as you're shooting for this number, the number is going to be what it is, but that's going to inform this next phase of your life too, and how to reframe your own conversation and relationship with money. The second mistake I see, we're going to sound like broken records, but frankly, I'm glad that we do, is really people working with other professionals in silos. I hit on it earlier. They've got their CPA over here, they've got their attorney over here, and nobody's talking. They have their investment person here. And by the way, they have their trust and estate person over here, and beneficiaries don't line up. There's tax issues. And so that cadence of sort of quarterbacking, there is nobody quarterbacking and running projects and triaging projects. Who do you need to be meeting with first? And so how does that non-silo approach, how should that look? So that's a mistake that I see. Um, and the third thing is going to be a little squishy. Mr. Hern and I are both Georgia Tech graduates, so we both do math well. But I have a squishy side since I'm the token chick on the panel. And what I'm going to tell you is when you sell your business, the three of us see people having identity crises a lot because this has been their baby. This was so much part of their life. And when the baby is gone, and the baby's been sold, by the way, what's next? I mean, there are whole books written around the psychology of this. And so just as you're preparing for a massive financial event, I'm not saying go have a conversation with your therapist around it, but really be thinking of what is this next identity going to be for me? That is going to align with financials. Do you want to be an investor in future businesses? Are you looking to sit on the sideline and sit on the porch and do nothing? So these sort of softer issues are just as important. And in fact, I've seen they can hold people back even more, especially if they have a very successful exit, if they follow all the tactical stuff that we're talking about. So next question, Mr. Hern, David. So what role, I think we hit on this a little bit, but perhaps you can dig in again. What role do you play in this process? And when do you come in, ideally?
Oh, well, I ask myself the first half of that question every day. The second half really depends. I think all of us here would, and anyone listening in would prefer to get in as early as possible to have the best impact, given Mitesh's comments on time to even do this when you are ready to hit go. So I kind of have a two-part answer to this. I have sort of my LinkedIn answer and I have my Facebook answer. So I'll give you both. My, the story I tell about my role, and since, it kind of reminds me of a healthcare scenario. My role is meant to be like a primary care physician. Only you're not coming to me to just do some little sports physical. We're going to do an invasive all day executive level physical, which is very different than the former. That's sort of my role is to take the DNA, analyze the blood results, do all kinds of samples, family history, spend a lot of time with you to get an understanding of that patient, or in this case, the business. And then we have a baseline, right? And what do? Well, we'll see you in a year. We're going to give you suggestions of what you should change, and then we're going to remeasure in a year, right? And so half of my role is that, right? Is this measurement and remeasurement, accountability. Though in reality, what this ends up becoming is basically a game show. So that's sort of more the Facebook answer. And the game show would be, or the reality show would be more like an HGTV's Love It or List It episode. And this is really basically what we do. We start the show with a detailed inspection, detailed appraisal of your house, in this case, business. We show you what it's worth today. And then what do? We say, we could sell it, right? We could renovate it. We could stage it, right? And when we do those renovations and stagings, what have we done? We've enhanced the value. And then, of course, at the end of that show, for those that have seen it, they're really duking it out, the realtor versus the renovator, trying to get the people to stay versus go. And all I can say is we put them through both of these exercises, and ultimately it's up to them, because we will have created a higher valued asset that works better in its new form, and they don't have to sell externally. They could sell internally. They could have succession to their family, or they could just keep running it, right? And if they want to eventually wind it down, they can do that, but now at a higher cash flow with less risk on you, right? So to me, half of my life is serving as this primary care physician for the business. And then the other half is really taking them through sort of a modern business version of HGTV's Love It or List It.
Got it. Thank you. And for everybody, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A. We're going to batch them all in the last 10 to 15 minutes, so feel free to keep asking away. Mitesh, did you have any feedback, comments with what David said? And would love to kind of hear more about your role.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that David said there as well. At least as far as a mergers and acquisitions attorney, we look at it similarly in some ways, a little bit differently in others, but we always approach our clients and go, hey, look, we know what questions a buyer is going to ask because even despite different industries, when someone is doing due diligence on on a business that they're going to be buying, they generally go down the same questions and paths. They want to look at accounting and tax and human resources and operations and contracts and you name it. And we have these long due diligence checklists. So we often approach our clients as early as we can. We want them to reach out early. It doesn't mean that you're going to be working with an attorney or an expensive advisor, but get the knowledge early because so many of these things can be done internally by a company, the cleaning it up and making it, look good and get ready. And David used the home analogy. I love it. I use that all the time
Too.
because it is so similar, right? You don't want to take your home to market unless you have trimmed the hedges, painted the inside, outside, cleaned out the closets, etc., and fixed all of the big things. And then you have those decisions of, do I sell it to my kids, right? And maybe it's a slight discount, right? Then maybe that's selling to your management team. Oh, do I keep do I keep the house and maybe rent it out for a little while, right? So that's kind of like, okay, do I take the company and maybe I just take some ownership off the table and I keep one foot in it, or do I actually take it to market and sell it? And there are so many different ways that companies are sold and that companies are bought, so many different structures. But we look at our role very similar again, as David used that analogy of being a doctor. We like to come in. It doesn't take much. Typically, when we start early, it's an hour here, maybe an hour a few months later, and a lot of it is just checking, coaching, and they can do. And when I say they, the business owners, the company, they can handle so much of this themselves, and they know their businesses better than I ever will. And so, it's just providing that early education, early coaching. Go, okay, let's check in just once a quarter for the next year, get stuff ready, and then as we do get closer, there is sometimes a bigger push to get things really in order.
Yeah, if people aren't hearing a theme, if we haven't already said it 10 times, start early. Oh, you know what? Start early and start early.
Yeah.
So, I think it's gonna be interesting to figure out who to start with, in some ways. But, so in terms of me, what role do I typically play? So a lot of times I'll have relationships already with the business owner, and my function, lest I say it, is again more of that like a quarterback or a project manager. So when somebody like myself or David is really looking at all the weaknesses, or Mitesh even in the business, um, there's 20 people 20 things you need to do, and it's like, oh my god, what do we do first? And so I'm trying to help triage and then make sure that we're getting some of these projects handled. And then of course on the financial angle, I'm looking at, well, how much do we need based off the lifestyle, off the current can't even talk, lifestyle. And so when we're running scenarios tests and stress tests, that's going to be important, because back to, let's say you do get a large multiple, David, or a large amount in the end, that's going to also define what are next steps. Are you buying your dream home, or is there not enough money to do that? Is it, I need to still work, or I need to start another business, or I'm going to be an investor? So it's really helping moderate those conversations. And listen, money is taboo, and there's a lot of emotion to it. And I used to not operate that way in my practice, and everybody has their own relationship with money. And by the way, there's a lot of weird psychology that happens after an exit where a very large multiple is received, and whether they deserved it, they're guilty, what is their obligation to their kids, to their family, how do they restructure their estate plan? And of course, there's the tax side. Like, I'm working all the time with CPAs. Like, how are we minimizing? What are kind of tax planning are we doing, knowing that this could be coming up? How do we need to be thinking about, things like irrevocable defective grantor trust to move shares of stock in? So that's an example of where I'm working with trust and estate attorneys behind the scene, not just people like Mitesh on the transaction. So there's a whole host of different things that go along with this. And so that sort of central role, that's been where I've lived quite a bit. And of course, at the end of the exit, we are building the portfolios and the financial strategy for tax minimization. And so people can live off that interest or the income off the portfolios, if in fact that's even the goal. And again, please put questions in the Q&A. Guys, please jump in.
Yeah, yeah, and Meredith, if you don't mind, I mean, on that point, we work with retirement counselors, right? And this is something that 10 years ago I've been like, what in the world is that? And now it is this budding industry. But what we find, and statistically, folks that have not planned for both the side that Meredith handles, right? With let's figure out wealth and your assets and children and trusts and this and that. There's the other side of health, and we see owners' health declining rapidly after they sell if they do not have some purpose in life. If they haven't thought about this, or it's like, I'm going to retire and play on my boat, and with my toys, that lasts only a few months, maybe a year or two at the most. And then we start seeing these other issues, because again, you have to think about, these are super driven individuals. So I definitely agree with that. Pre-planning on the other things. The taxation is another one. No, I don't think there's anyone that really likes to pay taxes, right? And if you could go through a transaction and pay the least amount possible, or sometimes it doesn't happen often, but pay nothing, it might be possible, but you have to start early. And that's the thing. Again, it doesn't mean you're going to have 2 or 3 years of just churning away and paying advisors and this and that. We're talking about little tweaks to your business to get you prepared and ready for sale. A quick story. I was at a nice conference last week. There were 500 business owners there, and one of them was telling me this story about a business that he was buying, and the person that he was buying it from didn't have a lot of advisors. And he started just telling me a little bit about it, and within just a minute, I was able to learn and assess that the person that sold his business to this gentleman that I was talking to probably could have exited the business without paying any taxes, zero taxes, because his original issue in C Corp, Section 1202, and we can talk about that later, but essentially, but he didn't know. And so he converted his entity just prior to sale, did a few other little tweaks to it, and instead of paying zero in taxes, he paid millions. And I was like, oh my gosh, this company was massive. Why did this guy just kind of wing it on that specific piece? It was a huge miss. And I don't hear those stories often, thankfully, but I would say once a year I do, and they always break my heart, and they're so avoidable. So reach out to those advisors, start learning what you don't know.
Yeah, I think the three of us could like spend 3 hours on all the nightmares that we've seen, because we've all seen a lot of them.
I mean, if I had a few pennies from each one of those nightmares, I probably wouldn't be on the Zoom. So
Yeah, exactly. David, did you have anything else you wanted to add that we've been discussing too?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, because you brought up tax, and Mitesh earlier brought up, an order of things.
Right.
Now, obviously, with tax, you're hoping for a conservative value. With M&A, you're hoping for the opposite. And so there's a natural order where you want to do, whether it's that IDGIT or these, exotic trust planning,
Mhm.
well before the event, and often we just were with a steel fabricator, and they were dead set that they would do the transaction planning And then they would worry about estate planning later. And I kept saying, like, but this doesn't make any sense. Like, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and had to draw some charts on a whiteboard to get them to see, this whole tax minimization story of freezing your valuation now before we go do all these great fancy things. And so, yes, there is an order of things. And since you brought up tax, we want to do that not in the midst of the transaction itself, hopefully well before it, before we've made great changes.
Oh, do you mean start early on the planning?
Exactly.
If we haven't already said
Uh,
it, start early.
Yeah,
Um,
I would, if you don't mind, I'd add,
yeah.
one more thing, as business owners, we have the great privilege of getting to, within the boundaries of the law, game the system a little bit, right? We can use our businesses to our advantage to increase our income, lower the amount of taxes that we pay, perhaps, gain some other advantages when it comes to saving. But some of those tactics, if employed too much, can actually cut against your bottom line of profitability. Now, can you add back, et cetera, to try to get the true value? Yeah, you can. However, buyers are looking for, hey, not how much have you gamed your company, but they're looking for how much is driven to the bottom line. That's often what the vast majority of offers are based on. And so if you're living this lifestyle,
Like
of
country club memberships being run through the business and stuff like that.
yeah, things like that, right? And again, I'm not a CPA, can't say what's proper or not proper, but just know that living that lifestyle is a little bit counterintuitive to getting the most money out of your company. And that's another reason that, hey, maybe a couple of years before you start, cleaning things up, cutting back a little bit, doing things a little bit more normal so that it makes that bottom line on your company look phenomenal and you get that big pop at the end whenever you go to sell.
No, this is great. So final question, and please everybody, put questions in the Q&A. We'll go ahead. I know Tamara or Tamara already has one in there, and we're going to get to you, I promise. But I'm hoping we can get some more queued up here. So David, what action, if somebody owns a business on here listening to this right now, what action should they take if they're interested in selling their business in the next, we threw the number out, let's just say next 5 years?
Yeah, great question. You know, for me, when I was thinking about this question, I found myself thinking of the gym for some reason. And when I look around at a gym, I see a lot of people that are much bigger than me typically. And I started thinking about the heaviest weight at the gym. And, so for some, you might start picturing some kind of, free weight or a bumper plate that's giant, and really what I've come to learn with this question is really the heaviest weight at the gym is the front door. If we can just get you to go through that door, things tend to just get easier. No matter which machine, which weight you choose to lift, things will improve. And so for this question, I just want them to take any first step because each step thereafter is going to subsequently be much easier. And for some, that first step might be they delegate to an admin for the first time in their life, right? That owner is willing to finally take a task off their shoulders. For another individual, it might be they've never done a true holistic financial plan with someone like Meredith in their life. They just had someone that was picking investments for their 401k, right? Another individual, it may be their first ever legal diligence and having someone like Mitesh do contract review. Another person, it could be their first ever valuation, even though they weren't required to do it, right? Another member might choose to, given the healthcare analogies we made earlier and given your top three mistake, Meredith, maybe instead of meeting with their advisors one-on-one, they do their first ever joint meeting in a state of the union that they've never done before, right? And so for me, it's less which step than doing a step, right? Because unfortunately, you're right, Meredith, that too many businesses are practicing medicine the way we did in the 90s before we had systems like Epic. We're just running from practitioner to practitioner, hearing different things, and there's no unifying vision between it all the way there is now, thanks to these electronic health records. systems. So for me, it's just recognizing that the heaviest weight is the front door and just taking that first step, allow one of us or all of us to be that encouragement to get you to step through that door.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Mitesh, you're next. So again, it's hard to beat Hern on that, but
I mean, that is such great advice because once you start, and I think maybe start with the right advisor. Of course, ask your existing ones because you've got those relationships, but let them know what you're thinking. Hey, I'm thinking about this down the road. What do I need to do? And that alone should start that ball rolling, right? And if you're not sure if you have the right advisor, start asking around. But I totally agree because one thing is going to lead to the next, and you will find that these folks you're working with they will guide you, they will take you through this process and help you. The other thing, and this may sound a little asinine, is take a take pen and paper, sit by yourself, don't ask anybody, don't tell your significant other, etc. Write down what is most important to you. And I mean, get super selfish about what it is that you want. And I say that because if you have a plan in mind, there is generally a way to make it happen. But you've got to be honest with yourself. So I'll give a quick example. We were working with a company last year, and this young lady has a massive construction company. She's done very well, and she had a management team that she wanted to sell to. She was really set on that. I want to sell to these folks. Okay, we started this process, and very early on, one of the things that we identified was, are these really the right folks? And then number two is, do they have the ability to actually get this transaction done? Because this owner did want to sell. She wanted to put some money in her pocket, but her primary focus, at least she was telling us, was on that management team. But we were hearing things right out of the gate that didn't seem to line up with that. 3 months down the road, $60,000 in legal plus all the other stuff that had gone on, we really came to find out that money was number one, not succession to the management team. And the deal ended. It just blew it all up because unfortunately, they weren't able to deliver what she wanted, but she had not been very honest with herself about truly her highest priority. So I always encourage folks, like, take that. Maybe that list will change if you're starting 5 years out, but try to figure out what's most important to you. And for some people, it's not money. Some people, it's legacy. Hey, they want to see that company keep going. For others, it's, I want to know that all these people I've hired over the years are not going to get terminated and or they're going to have jobs on into the future. Okay, that strategy is great, but it's different than let me maximize the amount of cash in my pocket. And the sooner you can identify what that is with yourself, the easier the next steps are going to be.
no, that's great. Um, wow. Yeah, we're three of us. We're pretty awesome with some of this conversation here. And in terms of me, it dovetails exactly with what you just said, Mitesh. I think the first thing in my mind with clients is understanding and having gone through the exercises on what equates to financial security, how much income that is, or if we don't want to create supplemental incomes, how much we need in an asset in a sale. Like, so when do we hit that official goal? And then also to think through, this is a tough one, is what does legacy look like? Most people I see are still so caught in a scarcity mindset of I'm going to spend my last penny the day I die, and I'm barely going to eke through retirement. Or again, I like to use work optional, where we're working because we want to, not because we have to. And so they never think that they can get to that legacy state. And so what does that mean? And what are you doing to prepare for that? For example, I just had a client yesterday, is she has kids and they've always had everything given to them. So if they end up inheriting, what does that mean? And when we think about legacy and money, it really stems from values. And your estate plan and what you're going to ultimately do in terms of legacy should reflect your values, whether that be philanthropy or whether that be in what you want to provide or not provide to your kids or family members. I've been very intentional. I know some people on this call, I went through a major life altering medical event right after having my son. And I got very clear. I was literally sitting in Duke's ICU. I got very clear on what was important. And I realized at 30, I had the chance to create this legacy because I had a lot of life insurance. And so I went about with my son, like, what was I going to do with him to create intentionality around values? We started trading a portfolio from the time he was 10 because I wanted him to be comfortable with money and not have a weird relationship with it. About half the clients I work with grew up poor and they do very well now, but that affects how they think about money. And when you get an exit, that could be 7, 8, 9 figures, that will mess with you. It just will. We all like to say, I'd love to have that problem, but it is a problem. So get an advisor, know what your number is. What do you need to get so that when you sit with somebody like Mitesh, you're very clear about what that is. That allows you to be, is it money or is it the team and the succession? So that's where I'd like to leave it there. Anything else you guys wanted to add before we jump to Q&A?
No?
Okay,
No, yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So Tamara or Tamara, I'm sure hopefully one of you guys knows this gal. I'm sure you do. What would you say about your efforts to sell to internal stakeholders? I'm curious about strategies and potential structures for trying to sell shares or the company in full to employees. I guess that's the ESOP, not doing it immediately, but aiming to be fully out in 10 years.
Yeah, I can
I'll
start and pass it
Yep,
over to Mitesh if that's
definitely.
okay.
perfect.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I feel like when you're doing exit planning, the things you're going to do are a lot of it is agnostic to which direction you go, whether that's external or internal, that the things you're improving, the things you're fixing will help regardless of which pathway you go. Um, but yes, I see a lot of owners struggle with this decision where so many want to sell internally, but then kind of can't, either because it's almost like this heart and mind pull tension where those are the people that know the business the best. They're going to keep the jobs, they're going to keep the culture, but they just don't have the funds, many times compared to the external buyer, right? But then you have a risk on the other side of that. So yeah, we tend to see people choose in terms of specific structure. Meredith just let one out, the ESOP for sure. If they're big enough, depends on the size of the company. If you have a legitimate middle management structure, that's certainly a pathway, but there's a lot of, regulation and advisors and fees that have to go in to execute that. If they're smaller, we'll see people do installment sales, those kinds of things. So yeah, I'll pass it over to Mitesh to.
Yeah, yeah. So there are definitely a few different ways of structuring it, but I would almost say that yeah, and I'm sorry, ESOP is one. Sometimes you can just sell to a few, a certain pool of employees, but just because somebody is a good manager, good director, does not mean that they're going to be a good business owner, right? Business owners are we're nuts, right? There's something this is a group of folks that when the lemmings are running one way, we're going the other, and it's that ownership tenacity is I've seen over the years. It's just not something that can be taught, right? Now you can take somebody that's close and mentor them and kind of get them over the hump, I think, and get them comfortable with it. But I think the first thing I would really focus on is that really the right move, both for the business owner and then secondarily, what is this group of folks like? And I think there are some ways to assess that. I jokingly say, often you'll find that, or we often get where employees want to become partners, and sometimes the owners are comfortable with that, and they come to us, hey, can you help structure it? Sure. And one of the first things I say is, hey, have you spoken with them about capital contributions and what that means? personal guarantees on any of the debt you may have or might be taking, and then have they spoken with their significant other, right? And explain what these things mean. And usually they go do that, they come back and go, all right, it's not going to happen. And so, we come to find that, again, that's one of those things. Are you willing to pledge everything that you own to back up a company, even if somebody gave you that company? Most folks go, no way, I'm not doing that. So anyway, explore that. If you're not sure how to explore it, get with your advisors. There are all types of resources out there. And whether it's through CPA, and we have actually done this, we will go in to talk with high level management to, to see, usually on behalf of the owner, to see, like, are they the type of material that it's going to, do they have what it takes to be an owner? Are they thinking like an owner? And again, if they're close but not quite there, okay, then there are resources to get them, get them over that hill. But that's probably where I would start first, is that the right move? Are they the right folks? Meredith, how about you? What have you seen with your clients?
It's in theory, especially in professional services, it's a lot easier because you've had your key person that's run the day-to-day operationally. Um, my issue has been back to like capital contributions and installment sales. It's whether they can get the funding to do the buyout. And will the revenues change with the owner gone? Now that's that issue is more relevant in smaller business, not as much mid cap. But that's a very real issue that I see. And, then the SBA gets involved, and not a bad thing, but that can create a lot more sort of due diligence for smaller business and whether key employees really want to buy it and what impact that's going to still have on customers if they're going to be leaving and how involved they were relationally with the existing clientele. Um, because you may be really key to some of those, to the revenue with some of those relationships. That's been my experience on the smaller side. Well, great. Well, and we have another question, it looks like. And that is, Sarah, thank you. It's been informative. Larger revenue businesses, and we're a micro business with revenue in the 2 to 3 range. Can you suggest some team scenarios? Excuse me, can you suggest the same team scenario? I've been working with a SCORE member and a SCORE team, which has been very helpful. We've progressed to writing a letter of intent and LOI, but your suggestions of writing down the post-sale plan is spot on. It sounds like after that piece, it would be a CPA stage. Again, the team recommendation, is it the same?
I think so. I think so. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need, a massive law firm. Maybe you go to a small or solo or mid-sized law firm that has a mergers and acquisitions specialist, and they're out there, right? You don't. I do think you should get a valuation, and I absolutely do think that you should have a CPA that has, help their clients through transactions, and then that wealth planner, wealth manager. Start off with, any of them. But I do think so, right? Because if you have folks that are, you mentioned, Sarah, LOI specifically, right? Letter of intent. I mean, if that team has experience in writing a lot of those and negotiating them, all right, that's cool. That's great. That's a good start. If they don't, then it's like, okay, you don't know what you don't know. And maybe there are other options that you've got on how to do it. But so do I think that the same types of advisors are needed? I do. I think that you just need to find some that fit with the size of your business and with fees that you're comfortable with. And again, they are out there. And I'll talk about myself for a moment. I was a solo, 15 years ago. I left big law and I was like, I'm going to go do this. And I was on my own for a few years. And I thought I was, and still do. I think I was great at what I was doing then. I thought I gave great advice. I was at a good rate. And I thought that my clients got a lot of value, but my rates are, less than half of what they even are now. But I was a great fit, I feel like, for my clients, at that time. So, Meredith and David, what would you all add to that?
I'd say it's a weird thing in professional services because everybody has relationships with their person. But at the end of the day, I'm going to equate my medical event. So some of you may know on here, like, again, almost 20 years ago, I had brain cancer. And so I learned very quickly that not all neurosurgeons are created equally. I had a major neurosurgeon here in Atlanta botch it. So I had to go to Duke and get my 10 times more expensive awake craniotomy, because the first craniotomy in here in Atlanta. Now I couldn't ask the neurosurgeon in Atlanta that was very renowned, can I see a portfolio of all your craniotomies? Any more than I could ask Mitesh and say, can I see a portfolio of all your operating agreements? Same thing with Dave. So it's, you have to look, I think, to a degree, tenure and number of transactions that they've done. Relationship is important. I I think the first step is going to be it is going to be some sort of, I'd start with 3. And it could be any of the 3 of us on here, including, which is not here, the CPA. And all of us on here, by the way, and after this, you'll get an email with all of our emails. All of us are very, very networked. And so we know who charges what, we know capabilities. So feel free to hit us up. There also needs to be a personality fit. I know my niche are with women entrepreneurs and women breadwinners. And like, the old white guy might not dig me, and that's cool and that's fine, but you're somebody's A client. To Mitesh's point, like when he was younger and charging less in fees, somebody was his A client and he could provide a better level of service than Big Law, who's also charging you $8.50 an hour. So it's finding where you are. Your single practitioner CPA, that world is pretty much gone, with as many in public accounting that have retired. And when you're starting to hit that larger small cap, mid cap, the mid-sized CPA firms tend to be a better fit because of experience. But it's kind of weird in our space. Like, how do you know somebody's good or not good?
And I would say, to add to that, reach out, or at least I'll just, say for myself, we always give upfront complimentary time. Like, we don't charge for our initial consultation. So, but, come prepared with questions. And even if I know, that, hey, you're ultimately going to go somewhere else, we do these things here, at least at our firm, to give back to the community. It's one of our core values. And so we give that upfront time in the business community. So, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and can try to help you, find some advisors to, to slot in.
And we're sending your email out to Mitesh, so anybody will be able to reach out to the 3 of us. And Dave, did you have any last thoughts or shares that you wanted to put out there?
I mean, sort of a test and trust but verify. So have a team, test the team, and go verify by talking to previous clients of theirs, which they should freely give you, or use LinkedIn to look at second level connections, or you can ask about these individuals. But no, I think most of what y'all said is pretty thorough.
Yep. Well, thank you everybody again for your time. Time is our biggest asset, maybe even more than your business. And again, have a good rest of your day. Please stay safe if you're in Atlanta with this crazy weather. And please reach out. We're all happy to be a resource to anybody that is listening to this. Have a good rest of your day.
Great to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you.